Hi, all. Oh my goodness, it's so exciting to see a lot of you here. Wow. It is wonderful to meet all of you. Um, Thank you so much for having me. My name is Emily Lubanko, Lubanko, and I'm going to be talking about art from the heart, making meaning with your own tarot deck. And I'm going to be talking about my work and how you might think about your art and how you think about art in general and how that lends to the general storytelling around tarot. So, let's jump right in. Who am I? My name is Lubanko. My pronouns are she or they. I'm not picky. Of a generation where, I just, that's how it is, right? So I'm an artist and a designer and a tarot enthusiast. I've been reading tarot for over 20 years. And as that number gets higher, that gets a little more intense each time I talk about this. And my work is a lot of very high intensity mythological work dealing with tarot and the sensual and the visceral and the psyche. So it's about the kind of stories that we tell ourselves and we tell each other across cultures and thinking about the commonalities that they have. And first and foremost, I am really excited to announce that my deck and my book, the Lubanko Tarot, will be coming to the Llewellyn in October 2025 this year. I'm seeing in the chat like greetings. Thank you so much for welcoming me to your event and your community. I'm just so warmly pleased. So let's get right into it. Here are some cards from the first edition of my tarot deck, which was put through Kickstarter. Um, and the way I describe it is it's, well, and now it's actually, the new version has 80 cards, not 78. So I added more, exploring the surreal, the intense, the queer, and divine. I'm exploring mythos, I'm exploring sensuality, and I'm doing so in a way that is colorful and unapologetic. And I'm hoping that with this tool, like any good tarot deck, it's about the kinds of conversations that you can have with yourself, your psychology, and others, and also about challenging and thinking about the kind of frameworks that we operate under. So how did I get started? I my tarot journey starts. I was, I think, 11 or 12 years old. I picked up my first Rider-Waite tarot out of a cult shop with me and my silly little friends. We were like, "Oh, what's this?" And I was hooked. I had these little notebooks where I would go to the. I will answer that question about why 80 cards. Yes. So in a second. Um, I I would fill notebooks and go to the library and take out all these books on tarot and be like, okay, how do I use this? How do I grapple with this? How do I think about this journey? Um, on this mood board, you can also see two cards from the Mary L. Tarot first edition. It was one of my most beloved decks. I think some of that intensity definitely shows through my future work many, many years later. Um, and in the process of making this deck, what did I learn? Yes, I planned and I made 80 paintings. Yes, I wrote a book. But I also really held myself to task. And actually, this project initially started as a passion project where I said to myself, for one project, I need to like every single painting I make. And I need to be proud of every single painting and I need to stand by it. I need to stand by the message and I need to be able to explain my decision making every step of the way. And as someone who was freelancing at the time, that's really hard, right? Like sometimes you have a job and you're just like, oh God, like I have a deadline, I have to get this done. But this was something where I said, no, it is done when it's done. And I will hold myself to that high standard. This slide is just funny because the first time I did the deck, I did everything myself, and it was absolutely insane. And so the sort of artistic integrity part also had to be balanced with things like feeding myself and understanding international manufacturing and shipping. Wow. So let's talk about the deck. So the first thing, so these are the 80 cards. Daryl said, "Hi, why 80? Why the two additional cards? Because this the Llewellyn, I'm so sorry, deck will have two additional lovers cards because the original deck had only one, and it's very intense. And I I like inviting people into my work, knowing that my work can be intense. And I also think there's something very beautiful about the diversity of love that exists in our world. And so I felt that including two more lovers cards was actually really important to me to show the diversity of that love and also meet people where they are. Some people really connect with really intense depictions of love, and some people need a little bit of a softer hand. And so it's meant to be a way to welcome you into this tool that does deal with a lot of shadow work and does deal with both the darkness and the light. So, what did it mean to me? I said this before, I'll say it again: uncompromising, unapologetic, unflinching. I deal with the dark and the light. Darkness defines our shadows, and light shows us what's ahead, right? And I believe very, very strongly about admitting the range of human emotions that exist in their ugliness, in their beauty, in their intensity, because it helps us see our world in an honest way. And admitting who I am and where I come from is part of that. As this artistic exercise, right? You know, I'm coming from a queer background. I have a lot of different stacked identities. People who are coming to this have totally different identities than mine. And so it's about acknowledging the tapestry of people who connect around art and this shared framework. It's about acknowledging the sincerity of where I come from and understanding that the voices around, like, you know, the people around me are very, very different people. And how do we connect? And how do I make a work that is both sincere to who I am, but also connects people? Why make a tarot deck at all? This is something that a lot of my friends started asking me with increasing stress as they watched me make more and more paintings and get more and more intense about this. It is a profound experience to think about what each part of this very human journey resonates with us and what it means. If you ask a group of random people what the magician or the fool or the lovers or death means to them, you're going to get very beautifully different answers. And that's the phenomenal thing about tarot, right? Is that you have, like, everyone in some capacity at a certain point in their life has experienced love, grief, and fear, but the way people talk about that is very different. So when you're making a tarot deck, where do you even start, right? The first questions I would ask, and you're going to see a lot of questions because I use questions as echolocation. When I'm inhabiting or entering any new space or understanding, I'm kind of looking around and I'm asking questions to understand where I am. So the first thing you'd ask is, what do I love? Who am I? And who am I in the face of what I love? And if I am different, and I am, how can I celebrate and also understand that difference? This card on the right, by the way, is my magician card with the new design. Daryl, I love this question about AI, and I will actually address this later in the presentation, so do not worry. So what hooked me? What drew me here? I'm sure. So on this slide, actually, these are cards from, I believe, translated, it roughly translates to Moon Princess Himiko Tarot by Ayumi Kasai, a Japanese artist. And when I was about 13, 14, 15, I was on my mom's computer, on my mom's desktop, back in the days on the dial-up, and on eBay. And I was like, I want a tarot deck. And I saw these cards and I was like, I have to have this. I don't care how many birthdays I go without presents. I need this. And it was sent to my house. And that devil card just spoke to me on such an intense level. The sensuality, the intensity, the sort of just going for it of it. And I saw these cards and I thought, I am going to make a deck someday. And about 15, 20 years later, I did. But part of it is thinking about what are you drawn to, not only artistically, but emotionally. What feels good to make, playing in your artistic space. And if you can't draw, some of that actually starts with literally physically holding materials. So I have a lot of different artistic materials that are based on almost how they feel in my hands. If I want a sort of frenetic, messy experience, I'll go to charcoal. A lot of my digital brushes I have actually made myself because they give this high contrast sponge painting effect. So I use materials in a way that feels good for my body. And I think that's really important, is thinking about what are you drawn to and what feels good for you. Um, Here's a mood board of just some of the many things that inspire me. I had anything from like Toulouse-Lautrec to contemporary manga to I think Julie Dillion is on here, a fantasy artist. There's so much on here. Um, but one of the most important things that you can do, and I'm not even just going to say as an artist, but as a person living in the world, is as you are using your voice and finding your voice, you have to acknowledge your viewpoint. Um, and that means asking some hard questions about who am I in the context of my larger world? How was I raised? And how does that differ from my neighbor? How does that differ from states overs, countries over, like anything like that? And asking those hard questions is really important. Um, for how you engage with yourself and your community and take responsibility for your point of view. So these are a lot of different questions that I ask myself when I'm making any work, like who am I speaking to? How am I speaking to them? Talking about tone, right? If you think about music, the same sheet music played on an electric guitar versus a piano versus a pipe organ is going to sound wildly different. And artistic tone is very important in that way. So to give you an example of that, here are 6 different paintings that are all made by me. I have very, very different styles that I use. The top left one for the tarot deck is the one that is what I call my main style. It's kind of my soul style, essentially. Um, but all of these were made by me. The one next to it, with the red, is more was actually an ink drawing that I colored digitally. The one next to that with the little dinosaurs and the kids having a party was client work that I did for a kids game. And then on the bottom left was a landscape painting I did. And the middle is an ink drawing I did, kind of Mad Max style. And the bottom right was a painting I did for a friend who was having a kid and wanted like a peaceful owl sleeping. And so I'm thinking about, again, who I'm talking to, how they will respond to the kinds of artwork I'm making, and what materials I'm using. Again, it's the electric guitar versus the piano versus the triangle. It's different instruments, even if it's coming from the same person. So more questions, always more questions. I am full of questions at all times. How do I see the world? How does my culture influence my viewpoint, right? What do I care about? How do I fit in this large tapestry of the world? And how do I make space for those differences? Um, Something that's very important too as an artist or just as a person is, what do I need to get off my chest? And how does that influence and sometimes cloud my judgment and the messages I'm trying to give? Um, the last 2 questions are, how much do I share and what are my boundaries? Because when you're making a work like tarot, you are opening yourself up to very intense questions about, again, love and death and grief and all of these very kind of universal human struggles. And sometimes you have to ask yourself, how personal am I going to get? And how much of that is going to read to others? How much do I pull back? And it is always your right, by the way, when you are creating, to get as personal as you want. You have to make the decision sometimes about whether that will be understandable at first glance to others, but sometimes that doesn't matter. Um, and so these are questions that I had to ask myself the whole time was, how raw am I going to get? And the answer was quite raw. My work is very out there in certain ways. But let's talk about process and let's talk about materials. So I said before, what feels good in your hands? I know some people where they love the gentle touch of watercolor. They love how it sort of blooms on the page, the way it dries. Some people, they want, I want something frenetic. I want something intense. I want ink, or I want something delicate. I want, like hatching. There's all these different ways to make work. Some people are moved by collaging because they can bring things together. Um, I do have some notes on like specifically making a tarot deck, is that ideally, if you are making an entire tarot deck, you are making 78 or more pieces. and thinking about how they talk to each other is very important. But there's also nothing stopping you, because I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat about like, what do I do if I can't draw? What do I do if I don't know how to draw? Your best starting point, honestly, is to take a single tarot card that speaks to you and really spend some time thinking about it. And spend some time thinking about it, writing about it, scribbling, and just give yourself some free writing time. Um, and then maybe start making marks on a page, get some paints, try some collaging. This is actually where sometimes like making art with community is really helpful. I have some friends where we like get together and literally do craft nights and skill shares. I have one friend who will make these like incredible blankets where she just weaves. I have another friend who will make these hilarious collages that are so whimsical. I'm sitting here with my like 7 different mediums at any time. Most recently, I'm learning to stitch leather. Like there's so much at all times, but there's never one way to make art. And I just, as someone who's also been an art teacher, I cannot stress that enough. It's about bringing something from your head and your heart through your hands. And that is when we get to the not result, but process. Um, and I'm actually Nika, I believe, and I don't know how to pronounce your name, but someone asked me, how long did it take you to complete the deck? And that is a perfect question for this slide, because if I had rushed through this and I'd said, all right, I need 78 cards, I need it done, 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 I could have probably banged it out in about 2 years. But I did not do that, because for me, the result is a fragment of the overall experience, because there is the process and then there is the result, and that is the lived experience together. It's not just the result. um, none of none of this is just about an idea. It's about the, oh well, like I thought about this but then I tried this and it came out totally different. That process is really relevant. It reveals the personal and the profound and the meanings and the layers. um, a crucial thing when you are making any kind of art is decision making that is left in your hands. Exactly, Kathleen. Kathleen just put it beautifully in the chat. The journey is what you need to learn from, not the destination. Beautifully said. Exactly what I'm getting at here. Something I say a lot to my students when we talk about process, and we talk about the difficulty and the pain of making art right, is we don't, ideally, when things are going well, we do not come into this earth thinking, God, I can't wait to be done. We're not put on this earth to rush through it. When a child is born, we hope, ideally, we don't go, well, maybe we can speed up this life and hope they die sooner. No, we are here on this earth to live. We are here on this earth to create and examine. And so someone asked earlier, about using AI. I do not condone the use of AI. You should always be making work with your own decisions. And that includes, because, so this also caveat that I do work very explicitly with tech. I know exactly how this technology works. Um, and so it is basically an aggregate of theft and other people's decisions. But also, all that aside, by turning your decision making process over to something that does not have your best interests in mind and having those decisions be invisible to you, you are robbing yourself of the experience of asking yourself these hard questions, these hard questions, and you are removing the emotional and the spiritual and the human aspect from that process. Um, it's very, very important to make your own decision, or else you are speaking with stolen voices and muddled messages that are not only not your own, but are selected for the sometimes lowest common denominator. It's a popularity sorter, and it's often sorting by like, oh, well, this face is most common, so it looks like this. Um, People can kind of start to recognize like the smoothness of AI and like the uniform beauty. And at the end of the day, the way I describe it is like you're putting icing on a cake that isn't there. There's not nutrition there, and at the you will and to live off of a diet of AI is to ultimately spiritually and emotionally and artistically starve. Um, and so I understand very deeply the pain of what it is like to try to create something and have it not come out the way you want. I have, if you look on the right, all of those images are sketches and trials and error. If you look at the card backs, I have like 20 different backs of cards that I tried. I have been drawing. I have been drawing for so long that I've definitely put in the hours to, refine that skill. But there are so many different skills that I'm still learning where every time I start something new, I feel like a child again. I'm like, oh my God, is it really this hard every time? Yes, it is. But that is the beauty and the reward. And the wonder of it is connecting with people and teaching each other, right? So let's talk. So, with the process of this work, I learned so much about my own artistic process, myself, and who I am in the world. And the first thing that I did is when I realized, all right, it's 2013, which many worlds away now. I want to make a tarot deck. What am I going to do? I made a bunch of little tiny boxes on a sketchbook page that were probably about a half-inch big and just started sketching compositions and saying, I want this element. I want this element. Maybe this, maybe it goes here. And just played around with like the messiest sketches. I mean, look at this. It's almost chicken scratch. But to me, it makes sense. Cassandra, I really like the way you put that. It would be more fulfilling to know you are responsible for everything on the canvas or page you use. Exactly right. Um, so process, right? Like I did so many drawings for all of these, and some of them were physical and some of them were digital, because for me, it feels very, very good to engage with the physical medium. And for me, a part of my life that I want to be in the physical is bringing a sketchbook around and looking at things. So even though ultimately this was going to be transferred to a digital space to be scanned and that kind of thing, I knew that I wanted that, physical aspect to be part of my life. And so the initial sketches were physical. Um, but the earlier cards, and again, this was done over a series of probably, God, 6 to 8 years, I think it took me to make this deck. The Hierophant was one of the first cards I made, and it is an intense and divisive card because it does look very critically at our systems, both for good and bad, right? And the ways that they dress themselves up. I speak at length about this in my book. Um, but the first sketch of this was a drawing that I brought to ink, and then I brought it to digital and I painted. And the brushes that I made that are for the digital, I actually made in Photoshop because I have very specific wrist problems. So I made them behave like dry brush acrylic so that I don't have to press very hard. So every aspect of this process was customized to who I am and also the life that I'm living, my lived experience. So horses. Oh boy, if you tarot has a lot of horses in it, and horses are sort of the joke of like, oh, you think you can draw a horse. I drew a lot of horses. I had a lot of fun, but there's a lot of process in that. Here's just an example of like that kind of thumbnail to finish painting sketch. The sun, which is this like pure expression of joy and wonder. He started as this little tiny sketch, and then doing some studies of different horses, people riding horses, and then ultimately this kind of spiritual explosion of joy, right? The chariot card was originally an ink drawing that I actually light boxed from a sketch, inked, and then brought into digital, and then brought the sort of digital painting home there. But when I talk about process, I think what's amazing is that I can look back at every aspect of this and go, I know what I learned from each one of these paintings. When I painted her, I looked at her and I thought she needs, that first initial sketch on the left, I was like, she needs more warmth and she needs more knowledge. This is the Queen of Pentacles. She needs to be content and really understand her surroundings. And I need to really fine tune that expression. I want her to feel grounded. I want her to feel weighty in the figure. I want her to feel strong, but I want her to feel at peace. And so I did a lot of refining on the figure, the gesture. I also got to draw some really fat bunnies, which was very exciting for me. On the bottom there, because my work has a range. Some of it is more cute, some of it is less cute. Um, but throughout this process, right, I made so many things and I got to use and reuse it. So when I was making the backs of the cards, um, one of these designs actually got reused to an altar cloth I designed. I did so many color studies and sketches to get the right message and the right color. And some of those color sketches ended up being used. I was like, oh, well, I like this color scheme. Let's use it for another painting. And I learned so much about color and my process. And this is just to show once I had enough sketches, I laid out actually every single one of the cards so I could slowly see them coming together and go, okay, these look like they can tell a cohesive story. So if I draw the Ace of Pentacles and the Queen of Cups, they can sit next to each other in the same set because ultimately this is a tool, right? But when you're taking on any sort of art project, don't forget to breathe, and ask yourself, what or who am I doing this for? And sometimes it's okay not to have an answer. Sometimes it's okay that the answer is just for the curiosity. Curiosity is one of the most, sometimes in absence of all else, sometimes when we have trouble finding hope, and sometimes when we are afraid, curiosity is one of the most beautiful concepts to follow when it feels like there's not much else. And so I run on curiosity. Sometimes it's just a what will happen next. I think about the kind of art I'm making for myself, but the bridges I'm also building, not only between the pieces, but between the people who are using this and how they talk. And the other thing I would say is when you're working with an archetypal set like tarot, it can be very, very tempting to get caught up in, oh, this person's a queen, this person's a king, and just like a fire sign. That is a starting point. We always think about going from the general, the archetypical, or archetypal to the specific, the lived and detailed. Live with an eye to the specific and not archetypical as final. Remember to see people in their complexity. Um, and don't lose your soul. You know, this has definitely been an interesting process for me because I made this is a passion project. If anyone likes it, great. But it's for me. And then cut to a few thousand people, many thousand people buying the first edition later. Boy, did I learn this resonated with some folks. And I had to ask some hard questions for myself too, because different people respond to artwork in different ways. And every single person has different ideas of what tarot and art should be. And the amount of times I hear, like, well, that's not my ideal deck, I would do it differently. And I say, great, do it yourself. You find what works for you. I've made what works for me. I've made a tool that works for my hands that sometimes tools were not historically made for my hands. But I offer this with open arms and a loving heart and a sincere heart. And the last thing I would say to that is when you're making things to be shared, think about the person that you needed as a kid and be who you needed. I needed someone who spoke unapologetically and who did not shy away from the truth, sometimes the ugly truth, when I was a kid. And so here, this is my opportunity to do that and to share that honesty with you. And so I just want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for joining me. My deck is coming out, and the book I wrote for it as well in October. It would be a real honor if you could check it out. Um, uh, I don't know if we have time for questions, but if there's one more, I can maybe try to squeak it in. What does the Queen of Cups mean to you? Oh gosh, that is a oh, she means so much. I don't know if I can get into that in less than a minute. Um, I wrote a lot on that in my book, so I would say look forward to it. She means a lot to me, is the shortest way I could put that. I'm sort of reading the chat right now also. Yeah, it's a real privilege to be here with all of you. Thank you so much. Oh, and the book is coming out. It's not out yet. But you can pre-order it, which is exciting. Um, so yeah, let's see. Oh yes, and there's a coupon code. That's exciting. Yeah. And also, I'm on Instagram, so if you have further questions, feel free to say hi. Um, I'm really excited to meet the community here.